Okay. So hi Mary, now we'll start with LO3, understanding the critical periods of language development in this unit. And talking about the indicative content, we'll learn about intervention strategies, which would be talking, reading, singing, pretend play, role playing, storytelling, visuals, gestures, songs and rhymes, common difficulties, and specialist support that is provided to children with language difficulties. So for the key terminology, critical period. So critical period is a specific time frame in early childhood which starts from birth to approximately age 7, where brain is most highly receptive to learning language. Because when children learn during this time, they grasp language very intuitively. We discussed in our last class as well that when you grow older, it's hard for you to learn language. That's because it's not the critical period. The critical period only is from birth to age 7. Make sense? Yeah. Then neuroplasticity, it is one of the key terms that is used in biopsychology as well. So neuroplasticity is when the brain's ability to adapt and form new neural connections, and it is here that it's peak during the critical period, making language learning more efficient. So neuroplasticity, if I have to explain in simple terms, is your brain has neurons, neural connections, you learn, and new neural connections are formed. So your brain, like during the critical period, it peaks. That is, it's more efficient for your brain to form more neural connections, and it is more neuroplastic during this age, which helps the brain to adapt and form new neural connections, which helps you learn language more easily. So that's why neuroplasticity is the term. I'll also make you watch a video on that because that's something that's important, and you'll enjoy learning about that. And as for language acquisition, like natural subconscious process of learning a language, it can happen through exposure and interaction, and it is different to formal instruction because language acquisition is something that is very, native or innate to you as compared to formally getting instructed on learning language. Phonological awareness, it's the ability to recognize and manipulate the sounds in spoken language, which would mean rhymes, syllables, and etc. It is a key precursor to literacy. Articulation disorder would be a speech sound disorder, which is characterized by difficulty in physically producing specific sounds, which means saying rabbit instead of rabbit. So you're not able to pronounce the words properly. And phonological disorder. So phonological disorder would be a difficulty in understanding and using the sound system of a language, which would lead to patterns of errors like omitting or substituting sounds. That means that it, children are facing difficulty in understanding the sounds of a language and using the sound system of a language. Then expressive language would be the ability to produce language to communicate thoughts, feelings, and ideas, which is essentially what communication is based on. And receptive language would be the ability to understand language spoken by others. So language, two parts, expressive language and receptive language. Then augmentative and alternative communication, which is also referred to as AAC. And these are methods and devices which are used to support or replace spoken language for individuals with significant communication challenges. And here we use picture boards, speech generating devices. We would learn more about this in detail at the end of this, presentation. Sorry,
Yeah.
sorry, I can.
No, I'm not saying anything. I
Okay,
just
your
said
voice.
yes. That's
Oh,
what I
yeah.
said.
Your voice was cracking a lot. Maybe it's the network then. That's completely fine. So AAC is something that we learn more about in detail when we talk about specialist support that we can get for children. Selective mutism, it is an anxiety disorder wherein a child is they can physically speak, but since it's an anxiety disorder, they do not speak in certain social situations. For example, if someone like a child is speaking normally at home because they can physically actually produce sound, but they're not speaking. It's different to someone who's actually mute and they're not able to speak because they have some physical dysfunctionalities. So it's like on contrary to that, it's selective mutism, which happens in certain social situations, and it's a kind of anxiety disorder. Then hemispheric lateralization. So the specialization of brain functions in one hemisphere. For most individuals, language is primarily processed in the left hemisphere. So anything you want to ask in this, or should we move forward?
Or we should move forward.
Okay. So I have a video. I will share that first. Can you hear the sound still?
Not yet.
Can you hear now?
No.
Yeah, can you hear that?
No.
Yeah. I
This is your brain.
can you hear now?
Yes.
Is it like clearly audible, or should I increase the volume, or that's fine on your device?
If you can increase a little bit of volume.
Control center of your senses,
Is this
your
okay?
feelings,
Yeah.
and your
Okay,
thoughts.
Yeah.
I'll start that
Right.
at the beginning then.
This is your brain, the control center of your senses, your feelings, and your thoughts. Your thoughts have so much power over your brain. Over time, frequent thoughts create pathways that become well worn, like a road you drive down often. These pathways become habitual ways of thinking. Each time you think a thought, it strengthens that same pathway, making it easier to think that same thought again and again. That well worn pathway becomes a habit of the brain. Sometimes this can be pretty hurtful. But the good news is your brain is plastic, and with repeated intention, you can change these pathways. That's called neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is the process of creating change in your brain to think the way you want to. You will learn how to focus on a different, more helpful thought and start building a new pathway. At first, it will take practice and intention. You will need to reroute your thoughts. Those old hurtful pathways will wither away as your new thought pathway becomes the well worn road to a better you.
Okay. So what did you understand from the video? Irene, are you there?
Yes.
Yeah. So I was saying, what did you get from the video?
Whatever it was written, the video was also about that. So it's about, how your brain process things, and then how you make decision. Like for children, it's like how they start speaking and how
Yeah.
their brain works.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
like here, the video like only talked about thought processes, but my
Yeah.
intention of bringing this video was because it's not directly related to language, but my intention of bringing this video was because of its visual representation of how wiring is done, because understanding as new learner would be more convenient then. So if you see, it treated the brain, it's called neuroplasticity because your neural, like your brain is like plastic. You can mold it wherever, whichever way you want to. So it's wired, and you can change the wiring. That's how neuroplasticity is also called, as if you can rewire your brain. If you're thinking in some sort of way, you can change your thinking, you can rewire it, and then and in reality, physically, your brain is changed. Like the neural connections are changed. So when I talk, so there's this study. Okay, did you know about this phantom effect?
Sorry, I didn't hear the last sentence you said.
Yeah. So do you know about phantom effect or phantom
No.
hand? Or
I've
phantom
heard
limb.
it.
Phantom limb.
I heard the phantom name, but I don't remember
Yeah.
anything else.
So, okay. So your brain has neural connections to some, different parts. It's connected to different parts in certain areas. For example, maybe this part would be, more focused on speech. This might be on hearing, like different things. And this might be for your visual aids. And then there was this guy, I don't remember the name. So I think his limb got cut off. And so you have your, neurons going straight to here to some part of the brain, right? I'm just like
Mm,
imagining, okay, I don't clearly remember which part is connected to which brain.
yeah.
Okay, so it goes to some part of the brain, and this guy's hand got cut off. Now it's like I think his neural connections that were going through this area because they were of no use. So they were like, you know, like I think the neural connections from this part got detached, but then new neural connections started to form, and then he could actually sense things like more actively from because other parts, suppose eyes, hearing, they started to form in that part of the area. So if someone would touch him, he would actually feel sensations on some different part of the body. So that's what neural connections are essentially. And that's why people say that if someone, for example, do not have um, the visual ability to see, they are better in singing or some other activities. That's also because new neural connections are formed in that part of the space that's not occupied with the first like thing that it was made for. Does it make
Oh,
sense?
yeah, it's quite deep though. But yes.
It's not that deep. It's like something I find very interesting. That's why I shared. It's more about it. You can definitely read on it. It's more interesting than it seems in general
Yeah.
as well. And there are studies on rats as well, like obviously because they start with animals, so you can also read about that and in general about how it has like
Yeah.
affected humans. So
Yeah,
that's
I'm
how.
sure brain is like something you can,
Mm.
the more you read about it, the more you go in like, wow, amazing.
Yeah, definitely. And that's why, I specifically made sure that you watch neuroplasticity here because it's briefly mentioned in the presentation. And that's because of language development in children. But, if you know about
Yeah,
it, you'll understand it like better for in case of
better.
children as
Yeah.
well because it peaks when it's during the critical period. So if I move on, there are three things that we would cover in this LO, which would be to understand critical periods of language development, how it's essential that which is like critical period is specific window where brain is most receptive to learning a new language. And then during these periods, children acquire language skills more naturally and easily. And if you miss these critical periods, it can lead to difficulties in language acquisition later on. So let's have an overview first. Definition of critical period, as discussed, it's a specific time frame in early life from birth to age 7 approximately. And during this time, the brain is especially sensitive to certain types of learning. And that would include language acquisition because language acquisition is intuitive. It's not like you cannot learn a language. You can always have formal instruction or language acquisition when you grow up. So if I have to like explain you with an example, if children spend time in a specific environment until age 7, you would realize that they eventually start speaking the language. You will never see babies learning language themselves. They just know the language when they grow up. No one formally teaches them A, B, C, D. They just know the language. They start speaking. And compared to if I throw myself in a learning environment where like someone's speaking a new language, I wouldn't be able to catch the language. Whereas if babies are thrown in that environment wherein someone's speaking a different language to contrary to, like contrary what they're like clean slate, so they can learn anything. They would grasp language. They would understand things. That's what language acquisition is, and how that's how it's different from formal instruction. It's very intuitive. It's very innate to you. Make sense?
Yes.
So during this period, the brain has a high level of neuroplasticity, which means that it can adapt and form new connections more easily. And it allows like more connections means neural connections. So it also allows children to learn language skills rapidly and intuitively, as I discussed. And the critical period for language development is generally considered to be from birth to around age 7. While language learning can still occur after this period, of course, we all learn languages after we grow up as well, but it's typically more challenging and full proficiency may be harder to achieve. Of course, if I start learning a language now, I can be proficient, but it would be more challenging for me compared to a child who would learn the same things. They would just learn it easily and they'll be more proficient in that. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you think one reason could be of we don't get we can't learn languages so easily as a young child can does? Do you think one reason could be because we have already so much in our brain, like so many things, so many words, so many things in our brain, and stress and whatever. Be- because of these things we don't pick quickly? Do you think
But
that could be one reason?
so for that, I think we should, like, if that's something that interests you, you should go to, actually read papers on that. But my, like, theory, like, it's my personal opinion. I believe what, like, that's why forgetting is also in place. Forgetting is a mechanism that helps you get rid of information that's not useful or is redundant to your brain.
Yeah, that's true. But sometimes we forget like useful things as well.
Yeah, so there are many like theories of forgetting. I think when we forget useful things, it's more about like sometimes do we like if we forget or like that's natural. Or there's a decay theory that I was talking about. That decay theory talks about that those traces that are not really useful, you just forget about these things. Or there's this learning curve by Ebbinghaus wherein it talks about that you learn and then you would eventually forget things. But yeah,
Yeah.
different theories, but they're quite
Plus,
interesting.
I think age factor matters a lot.
Yeah, definitely. But compared to like children and someone who's in their teenage years, or someone who's like in their 20s, I wouldn't say that they're that old to like forget things. If they're forgetting things like on a very abnormal basis, then that's something that's problematic or is abnormal.
Yeah. Yeah, usually when you are young, like when you're in your teenage, you don't forget easily. No, not at that time. But when you're like over your teenagers, when you're like an
Yeah.
adult, like growing up, you're in your 30s and stuff, then it's like it's
Yeah,
hard to
but
learn something and
but
then you
if
forget things.
if we compare that to neural connections, like this concept, that it can be more like in that sense, right? That when you're a child, your neural connections are like a clean slate. You can form as many neural connections as you can. But when you grow up, your neural connections are already in place. So it's like you already have information and not no new neural connections are being able to form because they're already so much in place. So that's why,
So what
yeah,
I said was right. Like
yeah,
one reason
very
could be this,
similar,
that you have
but
so much into your brain already.
yeah,
So
but
it's hard to take more.
yeah, so but you wouldn't like you cannot use the term forgetting because that's a different concept in psychology.
No, no, forgetting is a
Yeah,
different thing. But what I was trying to say is like when you are a child, you have a like fresh, empty brain. You can
definitely.
put so much
That's
into it.
so if we have to put that formally, that would be that neuroplasticity peaks when during the critical period until age 7, and it decreases when you grow old. So
Yes.
because you become more rigid, and that's what's written here. But if you put that in simple terms for your understanding, essentially more or less that's how it means.
Yeah.
Quite interesting discussion.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. So if you talk about the phases of language development within critical, but yeah, Mary, if you want to read more about it, you should actually, go to. I'll tell you these sites. If you go to Google Scholar, you'll actually find legit papers, university researchers or individual researchers, and these are something that you can rely on for your
Okay.
information.
Yeah,
Because
I'll
yeah,
see.
so as for phases of language development, the first one is infancy, which is 0 to 1 year. This is the foundational stage, of course, and here babies begin recognizing sounds and rhythms of their native language. Because of exposure to language, which happens through talking, singing, and reading, it is very crucial. because it will help babies develop a language map in the brain. So this time is more like exposure and recognition. Then comes the toddler year, which is 1 to 3 years. So now vocabulary grows rapidly during this stage, and children start forming simple sentences. So the brain is highly responsive to what? To new words, grammar structures, and sounds. Before they were just getting exposure, now they started to like make simple sentences. Then comes the preschool years, which is from 3 to 5 years. So now children's language skills they become more complex. They now learn grammar, vocabulary, and pragmatics, which is the social language cues. So they learn the nuances of sentence structure and they have the ability to hold conversations now. As for the next stage, which is early school years, which starts from 5 to 7 years, by this age, children are typically solidifying their understanding of language rules and grammars. So they start developing literacy skills and expanding vocabulary significantly. It's like they start with exposure, then during when they're toddlers, they just start speaking simple words. During the preschool years, they start forming more complex sentences, and during their early school years, that's when they actually start speaking or like properly and expanding their vocabulary as well. So brain development and language. So language acquisition is closely tied to brain development as we just discussed, particularly in areas like the left hemisphere, which is typically dominant in language processing. So there are like two key terms that I mentioned here, which is synaptic density. So young children's brains have a high density of synapses. Synapses, do you know about synapses, Mary?
No.
Okay, so there are, this is one neuron, this is the second neuron, and there's space between these two neurons. So when the neural connection like flows through it, it flows through the synapses. So it's a synaptic gap that's present.
Like
So
a
when,
bridge.
yeah, it's not a bridge, it's a gap, but
Yeah, I said it's
travels,
like a bridge
yeah, it's
to
like,
pass on the information.
yeah, definitely. So that's how children have in like a lot of synapses, a lot of neural connections, and that helps them, allows them to absorb language more quickly because information just passes quickly, and that's why
Hmm.
they have like they can absorb language very quick. And over time, so new synapses are pruned, meaning that children who lack exposure to language may have fewer opportunities to develop strong language skills.
Hmm.
Which means that if you're not using synapses, they'll just get, your brain will just get rid of it. So that's why exposure to language is important. So that all these neural connections are in place and their brain or their neurons start functioning better, and that's how they learn as well. So hemispheric lateralization is when the language development is primarily processed in the left hemisphere. So hemispheric lateralization is that our brain is right and left hemisphere. Left hemisphere is where language is very like language processing is very dominant. So there are two areas in left hemisphere which are Broca's and Wernicke's areas. Broca's areas is related to speech production and Wernicke's areas are related to speech comprehension. So during this critical period, your brain's language centers are very adaptable and very receptive to forming these connections. And yeah, any questions on this?
No.
Okay. So the role of social interaction during critical periods. So of course, like social interaction has a very great crucial role in learning language because that's where children are like interacting with people, interacting socially. That's where they're learning language from, and this is crucial because children need meaningful interactions to practice and understand language. Now, when they engage in conversations, storytelling, or they play with others, it helps children develop vocabulary, grammar, and social language skills, which is also pragmatics. And then your caregivers and peers, they provide feedback, reinforcement, and context for language use, making social interaction essential for maximizing the benefits of critical periods. Okay?
Yes.
So, as for the evidence that supports critical periods, there is this feral and isolated children. So it's a very interesting thing. I think you should definitely read about their stories. You'll actually find that very interesting. So there are studies of children who experience extreme social isolation or deprivation. Like one of them is Ginny, and the other one is Victor of Aveyron. So these children were like deprived of language during the critical period, and that's why they struggle to acquire full language proficiency later in life, despite intense efforts by others or NGOs. So I think one of them was found in the jungle, and the other one, I think Victor of Aveyron, was found in the jungle, and Ginny had a very abusive father. He locked her in her room for, I don't know, maybe 13 years, 9 years. I cannot remember, but like during this critical period, so she did not have, any chance to interact. And Victor, like the guy who was found in the jungle, I think he was found at the age of 13, and of course he had um, no language acquisition. Like the critical
But
period were
can he
already
speak
passed.
like, can he does like make animal sounds or something?
I think when I read about it, his structure was more like, yeah, he was able to form attachments with people. I think even Ginny was able to form attachments. So they used to do these basic instinctive stuff, wherein you're like forming attachments with people. You feel sad if someone's not there. So they were acting humans, but when it used to come to language, like actually speaking language, they weren't able to acquire that. And I don't
That's
think,
sad.
yeah, but it's really interesting case studies to learn about, language development in
Uh,
children. So you should read about it. It's quite interesting.
I
Now,
will.
yeah. So as for the second language acquisition, the critical period hypothesis is also supported by research showing that people who learn a second language before age 7 are more likely to achieve native life proficiency than those who start learning later. So after puberty, language learning becomes more difficult and achieving native life fluency is rare. So just as we discussed that, children can learn up to 6 languages when they're kids, but it's hard for us to learn even a third language when we grow old.
Yeah,
That's
true.
why that's why if you learn a second language during this time, you can like achieve full proficiency. So
Hmm.
yeah, coming on to the next one, which is neuroscientific research. So brain imaging studies indicate that children's brains process language differently than adult learners, with younger learners showing more activation in areas traditionally associated with language. So it's more like, do you know about brain imaging studies?
No.
Okay. So brain imaging studies is more like when, if very simply explaining, when they like check which areas are more active. So they will make you sit in the room, okay, with these devices on you, maybe easier, okay, brain imaging devices. So they would put that on your head and they would talk about things. When they would talk about language, some areas would show activation, that these are the part of brains that get activated when you're doing something, or when you're talking about language or any other thing. So when they want to know which areas get activated if you do something, you know about something, you think about something, that's when brain imaging studies get in place. So the places in our brain that are traditionally associated with language, like the left hemisphere or like different parts of the brain, or maybe frontal lobe if I'm not wrong, but yeah. So these areas become more activated. That tells us that So they compared. So they took young children, like young learners, and they took adults, and then they realized that young learners had more activation in these language areas in the brain compared to adult learners. Was I?
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you get that?
Yeah.
Okay. So now challenges that are beyond the critical period. Reduced neuroplasticity. So now as children grow, their neuroplasticity decreases, and it like makes it harder for them to like learn and retain new language skills. Accent and pronunciation. So older learners tend to retain accents and may struggle with pronunciation. So if we come from a certain background in a certain native language, we would retain that accent, and it would be hard for us to pronounce something different in a different accent or with a different pronunciation, because the phonological development is most flexible within the critical period. So if you leave a children from some country to another, like for example in the UK, people, immigrants, children, they would learn the accent and pronunciation, but their parents wouldn't. But they came at the same time, they have the same social environment. It's different for them, because it's hard for older learners to change their accents or they would retain accents and they struggle with pronunciation, essentially. Make sense?
Yeah, true. Yeah, of course, 100%.
Yeah. As for grammar and syntax mastery, so later learners often find it challenging to grasp grammar rules intuitively, which leads to common errors or incomplete language understanding. Anything you want to discuss? Because next is the summary, which you can have a look at later on. It just summarizes everything, and then the conclusion is that a critical period for language development is very essential for and it highlights this importance of early and rich exposure to language through meaningful interactions. Meaningful interactions is the key word here, as this would set the foundation for strong language skills. While language can still be learned later in life, of course, we can learn language later on, but the ease, the flexibility, and the potential for native like proficiency is the highest during early childhood, particularly before age 7. Okay?
Yes.
So now is this section is describing what a critical period is and why it's relevant to language learning. I think we've already discussed this slide, but we will discuss that in detail now. So a critical period, of course, again, refers to a specific window in early childhood and where the brain is highly receptive to language learning. During this time, the brain's neuroplasticity, which is the ability to adapt and form new connections, is at the peak, which makes
Mm.
it easier for children to acquire language skills naturally and fluently. So critical periods are relevant to language learning because they represent a time when children can learn the sounds, grammar, and vocabulary of a language most effortlessly. You can learn later at life as well, not with efforts, like more efforts. But after this period, your language acquisition becomes more challenging, and learners will find it like they will struggle to achieve full fluency, especially with pronunciation and grammar. You do learn some basic words, but the pronunciation, the grammar, that's something that people later in life find difficulty in learning. As for the concept of critical period, it highlights the importance of providing rich language experiences early in life. So critical period says that you need to provide your child with rich language experiences that too early in life. Even if you do that later in life, they wouldn't be able to catch up. So during this time, your frequent exposure to language, which can be through conversations, like having conversations, making them read, like or reading for them, singing and playing, can significantly impact a child's language proficiency and their cognitive development. Now we'll discuss some intervention strategies that capitalize on this critical period to enhance language learning. So intervention strategies to support language development would be talking first. So if you engage in frequent conversations that can help children learn vocabulary, sentence structure, and social language use. So how you can use that in daily life is examples can be that you're describing daily activities, you're pointing out to objects, and you respond to infants and toddlers' vocalizations. For example, you can say, just look, there's a dog. The dog is barking. So you're actually repeating words for them to understand, pointing things out. And the benefit, of course, would be that it encourages word recognition, and it encourages responsive communication as well as vocabulary growth for them. And reading can be another thing. Reading aloud introduces children to new vocabulary and language patterns and storytelling. If I'm reading something to some child, they would eventually grasp things. So how you can do that is when you're choosing age appropriate colorful books because children find it very visually stimulating or they enjoy these books. So with simple sentences and interactive elements, so you read aloud, point to pictures and discuss with them. This would enhance their comprehension, their vocabulary acquisition, and their understanding of language structure. Anything so far you want to discuss?
No, I agree with it.
Okay. So the next things are singing. Singing is like songs, rhymes, they introduce rhythm, repetition, and new words in a very engaging format. So, for example, if I tell you my experience, one of my English tutors, we had this poem in class. It was a very long poem, and I think we were in class 7th or 8th. So she made us sing that in some famous songs tune and composed it in that sense. And that's when she told us that children or like we would learn things more conveniently, more easily if you put that in a tune. And because it's engaging as well, you're also enjoying the learning process. And we eventually learned the entire poem, which was so long, just by making it, in a tune, in a format. And that's also because why we are able to learn the entire song's lyrics. If I give you a paper with some famous songs lyrics, would you be able to learn that entirely? No.
Yeah,
But if I make you listen to that song again and again, you would eventually learn the lyrics entirely, though.
true. And you know what? When I was a child, when I was in school and my exams were near, sometimes it's hard to remember. I used to give those words a tune, and that's how I remember sometimes. So you are talking
Yeah,
about your teacher, and I'm talking about my personal experience. I used to do that. So it actually, whatever I'm like, some topic, it's hard for me to remember, so I give it a tune, or any advertisement jingle, I just put the
yeah,
words in that jingle tune, so I can remind it,
definitely it really
so like
helps,
I
right?
can remember
Yeah,
it, and whenever I'm sitting down in my examination room, it just comes in my head in that tune, so I just quickly write it down. So I
yeah.
used to do that, so it definitely makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. It was very helpful indeed, and that's why we're talking about it. You can this would support language processing, their memory, and phonological awareness. If you like sing for them or sing with them.
And I think it helps with their gross motor skills as well. If you do few actions with a song or poem, whatever you are doing, if you do some few actions with it, the children will remember your hand gestures, the
Yeah,
actions you
definitely.
made. So
It
whenever you sing a song, they start moving their hands, so they know, like
definitely. Yeah,
so
because
they remember it.
they start associating your action gestures. I would personally have a habit when I was a kid. I would just do this because I would start remembering because I learned while doing this. So now I've
Mm,
associated the learning, the memory with hand gestures as well while I'm speaking. So
yeah.
now I would have to do this to remember or be more comfortable in speaking what I had learned. That's because my brain had associated or was conditioned in using hand gestures the same way I would use while I learned it. It's interesting, right?
It is.
Yeah. So, on a similar note, here we have pretend play. So, pretend play, it encourages imagination, your storytelling, and the use of language to express different roles and ideas. So, you can encourage children to create scenarios, use different voices for characters, and engage in dialogue with peers or caregivers. It will build narrative skills, vocabulary, and help them understand how social language uses them. So, role playing. Role playing, it will provide a structured language practice through interactive scenarios that would require conversation and collaboration. So, you can like set up play scenarios like grocery store or a doctor's office where children take on roles and use language to interact. So how they're beneficial is when it because it helps develop conversational skills, your confidence in using language socially, and the situational vocabulary. Next would be storytelling. So storytelling encourages children to create their own narratives. They promote creativity and language skills. How you can do that is you can invite children to make up stories using toys, drawings, or their imagination, and you can ask open-ended questions to encourage details. This would enhance vocabulary, their ability to express ideas clearly, and sequencing. So next is visuals. The visual aids support understanding by providing concrete references for new vocabulary and concepts. So you can use pictures, illustrations, and you can point out to a picture of a cat saying that this is a cat. This would help them associate words with images, and this would reinforce vocabulary comprehension. Because when you like see and learn, it's more convenient rather than just cramming through your theory. That's why it's there for even in school, teachers would say that learn things practically. You cannot learn things theoretically, you'd forget naturally because you cannot retain that. But
Yeah.
when you learn things in a practical setting, or when you see things and learn, it's more convenient because you visually seeing it, then you retain it in your brain. Or sometimes it's also said that when you're learning, you need to read things out loud because you're also listening to them. So your brain is learning from hearing as well.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
where we use flashcards for children. so they remember it easily.
Yeah,
Because
definitely.
when they see, it's easy to remember. Even for us, if we see something, it's easy to remember. But if we just
Definitely.
listen and no see, we don't see, then it's hard to remember.
Definitely. I mean, I think you should, if you're like interested in it, you can read about memory, semantic memory, and different types of memory. They also talk about like which memory are like what kinds of memory do you have in your brain, and then how most memory is convenient to learn, forget, like things like that. It's interesting to read about if you're interested in all these things.
I will. I think
Yeah,
I will.
yeah, definitely. Would love to know about what you think. Like we can have a lovely discussion on all these things. Then we
Yeah.
have gestures. So gestures is pairing spoken words with gestures, which can help children understand the meaning of words by providing a physical reference. It's exactly the same thing I talked about. You know that you learn things, you understand things by shaking your hand, moving your hands, and then you use gestures like pointing to a ball while saying ball, or waving to indicate bye bye. So if I just wave, that the person would naturally prompt bye bye, or the child might naturally prompt bye bye.
Yeah.
That's how they start learning when you relate gestures with words. They start pairing it. Then the benefit would be that it supports vocabulary retention and word comprehension, especially for kinesthetic learners. Learners who are like comfortable with bodily movements, like who learn more comfortably with bodily movements. That the songs and rhymes. It's very similar to what we did before. It would improve memory, phonemic awareness, and the ability to segment words into sounds. Then talking again. Consistent conversation is crucial because it reinforces language patterns and engages children in responsive language use. You can reinforce language patterns, it encourages responsiveness, and it strengthens and builds on vocabulary over time. So reading again or singing again, it's again the same thing that providing repeated exposure to reading or providing consistent singing sounds. This would help strengthen their understanding of language patterns. It helps build vocabulary and fosters the love of reading, or it enhances auditory memory, helps with pronunciation, and builds phonological skills that are essential for literacy in future. Okay.
Yes.
So here's a summary table for you, and then coming to the conclusion, it would be that intervention strategies that we just discussed, they leverage the critical period for language development, and it provides rich experiences that can support growth of vocabulary, comprehension, and skills that are like important in social language, which are also pragmatics as we discussed before. So these activities make the most of the critical period by immersing children in interactive and meaningful language experiences. Anything you want to discuss before we move to the next section?
No.
Okay. So now we'll talk about the common difficulties that children experience with their language skills. So children may experience a range of difficulties that can impact their language development, and that can range from factors that are environmental or factors that are very specific to developmental or physical challenges. So understanding these common language difficulties is of course important because you need to identify, you need to provide support to children who are struggling with language skills. And here we'll have an explanation of all the common language difficulties that children face. So the first one would be environmental factors. Environmental factors can include background noise, television, radio. Now, why it's like like the mention of the common difficulties? That's because when you have excessive background noise, okay, anywhere like that can come from TV or radio, from any construction site, it can interfere with children's ability to hear and focus on spoken language. So when it's their time to actually focus on social interactions, listen to people around them, to learn language from listening, they're not able to do that because it's so distracting for them. And when they get distracted, they're not able to pay their full attention on the adult interactions that are taking place, or the process that's taking place for spoken languages. It makes if the quality of adult interaction is poor, such as when adults are distracted or using short or unclear sentences, children even when adults get distracted, children even then miss valuable language learning opportunities. So example would be a child may struggle to understand instructions or respond to questions when the TV is on in the background.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the next is autism spectrum disorder. Do you know about ASD?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll make it brief then. So children with ASD, they often experience language and communication challenges. So what challenges they face mainly is that they have delayed language development, they face difficulty in spoken language, they struggle with expressive communication, they're not able to express themselves, and so mainly their problem lies in understanding spoken language, whatever others are saying, unable, like struggling with expressing themselves, and they have delayed language development, all in all. So, impact on language development would be that children with ASD, they may have a limited vocabulary because all these things, the effect would be on vocabulary, and then they find it challenging to engage in social interactions. So, even their social interactions are hampered because of their communication, and they struggle with understanding non-verbal cues. They would, so if you would, be sarcastic, or you would, use any kind of non-verbal cues to let them know that, oh, do this, or you should have done that, they would take it quite literally. They wouldn't understand non-verbal cues. So they might use language in atypical ways. Atypical ways is the unusual ways that's not used normally. And example would be echolalia, which is repeating words or phrases. So they repeat words, repeat phrases, and that's called echolalia. So example would be a child with ASD may struggle to understand idiomatic expressions because they take things literally, or they have difficulty while with turn taking in conversations because they lack pragmatic skills as well, which is the social interaction skills that we discussed before. Okay,
Yeah.
so hearing impairment, very basic. Of course, if you have like a hearing impairment, you cannot. There are physical difficulties, or physical abnormalities. You wouldn't be able to listen or may not respond to sounds, or you would expect delayed speech, your language milestones would be delayed, or you can misunderstand spoken language. So example would be a child with a hearing impairment may not respond when their name is called, or they may mispronounce words due to lack of sound exposure. Okay,
Yes.
so articulation disorders, they occur when children have difficulty producing certain sounds, which can lead their speech to that is which can lead their speech to be hard to be understood by others. So of course, it impacts language development because these disorders can affect a child's intelligibility, which making it difficult for others to understand them, and then this can lead to their frustration, and this can impact their confidence in speaking. This would make them very unconfident when they speak. And the example could
Yeah.
be a child with an articulation disorder might say babbit instead of rabbit, or soup instead of soup, because they're not able to pronounce things properly.
Yeah. It's hard for them.
Definitely.
And
And
then
yeah.
and then the bully make it more harder for them. So of course then they lose their confidence in speaking.
Yeah, and then it might affect their self-confidence, self-esteem, many different things like that. Because
Everything. So
yeah,
yeah, it has
definitely.
like really bad impact in so many
Yeah,
ways.
definitely. Good point. And then, if you talk about the phonological disorders, it involve difficulty understanding and using the sound system of language, and they often result in patterns of sound errors. So these children may simplify words by omitting certain sounds, or they would substitute easier sounds for harder ones because they just want to simplify words. Either they omit sounds, or they like the sounds that they find harder, they just replace it with the easier ones. So phonological disorders can lead to significant difficulties with speech intelligibility. Now these children may struggle with reading and spelling later, as these skills rely on solid understanding of phonological patterns. They do not have the skills to do that. So a child may say go ahead, gog instead of dog, so that, or pain instead of pain because of phonological disorder. So that might affect the reading and spelling later on. Understandable?
Yes.
Okay. And then selective mutism. We've already discussed about it that this is an anxiety related disorder. This is an anxiety related disorder where children have the capability to speak. They are physically fit to speak, but they wouldn't speak in certain social situations. And So children with selective mutism may miss out on language practice and social interaction opportunities, which would hinder their, of course, vocabulary growth, sentence structure, and social language skills. Example could be that a child speaking at home very comfortably, but when they go to school, they just become completely silent.
Hmm.
So, so they're not getting the exposure to speak, the classroom conversations or activities that they should have gotten before. So that also, affects language development. Now, this
Yeah.
is a summary, and if we have to conclude this section, it would be that difficulties, these are all difficulties that make it important for us to realize that how important it is um, for early identification and tailored support. Tailored support is that you cannot just use the same kind of thing for everyone. Every child is different, so you need individualized support. You need to tailor them accordingly and then help them overcome barriers to language development so that it can be ensured that they're fully engaged in learning and social interactions.
Yeah.
Anything you want to discuss, add, comment, say, question before we move to the next and the final section?
Not really.
Okay. So now we'll evaluate the specialist support available for children with complex language development needs. So various specialist support services are available that can help them overcome challenges and to help them reach their full communication potential. So these services are like they often are very targeted intervention, therapy, or and resources that can support language acquisition and development. So we have specialist support listed here.
Hmm.
So the first is Every Child a Talker, ECAT. So Every Child a Talker is a national program in the UK that focuses on enhancing early language skills in young children. It would provide the children and their families with resources, trainings, and strategies that can improve the quality of adult-child interactions and the language environment. So the support provided by ECAT is, they equip early years practitioners with tools and techniques to identify language delays and support language development in children. And how they do that? They do that through interactive play, conversation, and rich language experiences. As for the effectiveness, EGAT has been successful in promoting early language skills and improving adult interaction quality because they're making it especially useful to prevent language delays and to enhance language rich environments. So this basically support adult child interactions. They provide strategies. They get in touch with they equip early years practitioners as well with guidance. So it's a very good program, very effective. Then we have speech and language therapy (SLT). So it's a specialized service that is provided by trained speech and language therapists. Okay, and what do these trained speech and language therapists do? Is that they assess, they diagnose, and they treat language disorders in children. So first they do assessment. They see assessment is when you do assessment tests of what all things they're going through. You take down their history, case history, and then you write down about what you just make a checklist of what if this can be something or they can be going through this. You just start to um, have a funnel shape model wherein you try to cut down on which problem they might be facing, and then you diagnose them and then you treat language disorder. That's what they do. And so the support provided by these helpers would be that they work directly with children to address speech sound issues, articulation, comprehension, and expressive language skills. They provide individualized therapy plans and strategies for parents and caregivers to continue language support at home as well. So of course, not everything can be done in a 1 or 2 hour therapy session. So they provide individualized therapy plans and strategies. So they are custom made, tailor made for the parents and caregivers to use at home so that they can continue their language support. So as for the effectiveness, SLT is a widely recognized and effective intervention for children with speech and language difficulties because they address specific needs with tailored exercises and therapy sessions. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, collaboration with educational settings. So, collaboration between speech therapists, teachers, special education coordinators, and parents, it ensures that language support is consistent across home and school environments. So, as we just discussed, 1 or 2 hour therapy session cannot make like a huge considerable difference. You need to have an overall or holistic impact everywhere for the child to grow. And that's why schools implement language programs. They often in collaboration with specialists, so that language skills are reinforced during class activities. Teachers may also use specific techniques or resources provided by therapists to support children with language difficulties. Now, consistent, that's the key term. Now, consistent support across settings enhances the effectiveness of language interventions and creates a holistic support network for the child. We need to make it effective, and that's why it's important for you to make sure that holistic support network is provided to the child. Now, augmentative and alternative communication, AAC. So, AAC refers to communication methods and devices that support or replace spoken language for children who have significant communication challenges. Now, these can include picture boards, communication devices, and voice output systems. So, AAC systems they can enable children with limited verbal skills to communicate and express their needs. So, if children are finding it hard to communicate, these are the communication methods and devices that aid them to be able to communicate well. So specialists work with families and teachers to incorporate AAC into daily routines and activities, and it's highly effective for children with severe language impairments. It gives them a voice and helps them to participate in social and educational activities. It enhances their independence and confidence as well. So you can use picture boards, you can use communication devices, voice output systems. All of these are helpful for them to communicate effectively. The next would be the sensory impairment team. So sensory impairment teams, they consist of professionals who specialize in supporting children who have hearing or visual vision impairments. So that's why sensory impairment teams. Sensory, like senses, it includes hearing, vision, so sensory impairment. So these are teams that consist of professionals that assist in children with hearing or vision impairments. So they provide tailored resources and techniques to help children with sensory disabilities develop language skills. So as for the support that's provided, the children with hearing impairments, the team may introduce sign language or listening devices. And for those with vision impairments, they may use tactile or auditory learning tools. The team also collaborates with teachers to adapt the same in the classroom learning environment, because as we discussed how important it is to have holistic development for the child for these interventions to be actually effective or make a considerable mark or difference. As for the effectiveness, sensory impairment teams also have children with hearing or vision issues like overcome communication barriers, improving language skills, and to support their academic progress. Then the last one would be portage workers. These workers provide home-based educational support for young children with additional needs, including language delays. So young children who have additional needs, which can include language delays, they provide home-based educational support. They work closely with families. They offer tailored learning activities and developmental support. So portage workers use play-based learning techniques that can engage children in language activities, and they provide families with strategies as well for language development and help set achievable goals. So if you're making tailored plans, first of all, you need to make tailored plans for children who need assistance. And then if you're making tailored plans, you need to work closely with families to make them realize, because they're not specialists. You need to let them know what they actually need to do. You need to psychoeducate them or educate them on any other problems as well, and also help them set achievable goals. Or even if you tell them, that this is how your strategy should be. If they make unachievable goals at the end of the day, or at the end of the year, or maybe whatever time period they've taken, they would eventually give up. It is very demotivating. So you need to set achievable goals for you to be motivated enough to practice that again, so that you know that you are achieving goals. You can see progress. If you set unachievable goals, you won't be able to see progress. And this will go down all in the chain. And then these are effective for young children, they particularly those who may not attend school yet, because this gives them personalized support at home and which fosters early language development in a very comfortable setting. So this is the summary table which you can have a look at. This summarizes everything, and the conclusion In summary, these specialist support services, they provide essential resources, therapy, and tailored interventions to help children with complex language needs develop essential communication skills. Now, through collaborative and individualized approaches, these supports ensure that children receive the necessary help to succeed in both social and educational settings. Mary, anything you want to talk about? I think it was a bit rushed in the end, but I
It was quite interesting topic, to be honest, and there were so many things which I was not aware of, and through this I knew those things now. Did you heard about Musharraf Asghar?
Sharaf Asghar. No, I don't know about
Okay, he is now a motivational speaker
that.
and educator as well. But when he was young, he had that stammer. You know what stammer is, like a speech condition
Yeah,
where he has difficulty in speaking smoothly, and word got stuck in his mouth and it's hard for him. He'll take his time for those
yeah.
words to come out. So he was like this, and then I personally met him, and it was
Wow.
so nice. It was so nice listening to him how he overcome his with his condition. He still have it, but now you cannot feel it because now he have confidence. So it will be good if you want to, he's on YouTube. You can see his videos on YouTube as well. But it was quite good to see like children when they are like children and they have speech or language difficulties, but when they grow up and they overcome it and then they become motivational speaker or they become educator. So it's nice to see, like, it's not a disability which you can live with your whole life.
You're right. Definitely. But that
So
sounds
but
very
what they
interesting.
need
Yeah.
is just a right type of help and a good
Yeah.
environment.
Yeah, that's why, as I mentioned, it's important for early intervention and early identification and early intervention for them to work on it before it becomes, normal or hard to be changed later in life.
And
It's
you know
quite
what
interesting.
helps
Yeah.
him
Yeah, yeah, go
when he,
ahead.
it's like when he reads something. First of all, he already had that language condition.
Yeah,
Plus, when he speak in front of everyone, it makes everyone nervous. Even us, we can speak properly, but it is still make us nervous. So that makes nervous. He loses
yeah.
confidence. So stuff like that. So one day, his teacher told him to put hand free in your ear, and there was a music on it, and he gave him paper to read. So he's distracted with the music in his ear, and then there's no anxiety and pressure like everyone is looking at me because the auditorium was empty already. And then he start reading, and and then he starts speaking, so the confidence comes from there. So that's how it helps him. So it was his teacher's idea to put music in his ear and then give him a paper to read. So it was quite interesting. If you want to see it, it's on a YouTube as well.
His name is Asghar.
Musharraf Asghar.
Musharraf Asghar. Okay, I'll have to. It sounds really interesting.
Yeah, it's quite interesting to know, when you know someone, like a person, not like just theory and topics. If you know a person and then you see their journey, it's then you understand it more better when they
Yeah,
speak, like how it works for them and what happened. And when you speak from someone who actually went through it, then it's easy to understand, and then you can relate as well if like something is going on with you too.
no, definitely. And I think that's why it's important to learn practical experiences because you see around, it is quite interesting to know how people actually, overcome the things. And when you like read them, it's like just basic theory and everything. It sounds boring, but theory is based on practical experiences. But when you actually learn about case studies or these practical experiences, that's when learning something
Yeah,
makes like more sense. But it actually sounds
true.
really fun. Thanks for sharing that info.
Yeah, no worries. And it was really nice,
Yeah,
today's
same.
lesson. See you next week, Suknoor, and I will email you if I'll be able to attend at 12.
Okay.
It's fine. If not, then I will email you in that case. And we'll adjust the time then.
Okay, no problem. Have a
Okay,
lovely
thank you
day.
so much.
Thank you.
You
Mhm.
too. See you next week. Bye.
See you. Bye.